Richard Hedrick has served as the Alachua County Public Works Director since 2003. He has 40 years' experience serving the public in local government. He spent 18 years serving as a city and a county manager, primarily in Virginia. Rick came to Florida in 1993. He served as the county manager in Polk County, Florida, and deputy manager in the cities of North Miami Beach and Clearwater. Immediately prior to coming to Alachua County, Rick served as interim president of the Innovation Group. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. Public Works is, such a massive department and such a huge part of the priorities of the Board of County Commission. As you know, we're doing a series where we interview each department director just to try to give the general public, a basic kind of entry point into what each department does. So why don't we begin with that overview? Tell us what the Department of Public Works is and what it does.
Thank you, Mark.
Simple question to start with.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to talk with you and the public about what we do in Public Works. As you pointed out, the Department of Public Works is one of the two larger departments in the county operation. Public safety and Public Works are the two largest. In the case of Public Works, we have approximately 225, in round numbers, employees. We have 5 divisions that are responsible for providing what we call direct services to the public. Right. These are the services we provide, for the most part, are the on-the-ground services, the things that people see day to day in their daily lives.
Right. As Commissioner Delaney is fond of saying, when you roll out of that driveway, just about everything you're seeing around you is part of the public sector. How are you budgeted? I know that it's not as simple as you get general fund dollars. There's a number of different revenues that come into Public Works. Can you explain that?
Yes, that's correct. Actually, I have a slide that represents that, and it's, if I may, we've put together a little pie chart that shows how the department is funded. Great. The key point I would make is, for the most part, the Public Works Department is funded through fees. The gas tax pays for the predominant amount of our expenditures for road and bridge.
And it has to go towards that.
Yes, and it has to go to that. Actually, of our 5 divisions, only 2 are funded by the general fund, the Animal Services Division and the Parks Division. Everything else is funded through either the gas tax or a fee for service, as in the case of solid waste, or in the case of fleet, that's an internal fund whereby the departments are charged for the service that the fleet department or fleet division provides for the rest of the departments.
So that revenue is spread out through all the different departments that use fleet.
Actually, it creates quite a challenge, because when you look at our total budget, it's $38 million. That sounds like a lot of money. But it becomes quite an administrative challenge, because we're not to administer that, because for the most part those funds are restricted to that division. The gas tax money has to go for road and bridge operations. The money we collect in fees for solid waste, for that service, is restricted to solid waste services. The same thing is true in the case of fleet. We can only spend that money there. In the case of parks, a good portion of that budget, 75%, is actually MSTU funding. So there, once again, even though it's MSTU/general fund type money, we're restricted. But as a result,
if I may, I always do an acronym alert.
Sure.
MSTU, for the folks that don't know, is Municipal
Services Taxing Unit.
And that covers...
And that's the unincorporated area services. And so as a result, to administer the department, it becomes a bit of a challenge, because I'm not able, if I've got a shortfall in one division and maybe I'm running a little bit of a surplus in another division, although in recent times that's not happening very often. I don't have an opportunity to pull from one fund to another fund to help make up those shortfalls. Every budget in each division has to be administered as a standalone budget.
Right. You mentioned animal services, so why don't we jump into a division by division lightning round here?
Okay, sure.
Tell me about animal services.
All right, well, I have another slide I'd like to share if I may, and it reflects the structure of the overall department.
Oh, okay, good.
And you'll see that animal services, for example, I mentioned the approximate to, well, it's actually 223.5 employees.
Missed it by that much.
Exactly. But in the case of animal services, they're a division that has approximately 36 employees. For the most part, they provide direct service to the community in the terms of enforcement,
right,
whereby they go out and respond to complaints about animal cruelty. They go out and pick up strays. They respond to complaints about neighbor issues involving animals. More recently, we've been asked to get involved in helping with the coyote population.
That's right.
So we're having to address that more often than not. Animal services, if anyone has an animal-related issue, we'll at least get the call. Dogs and cats are our biggest population that we deal with, but we have dealt with exotic birds, exotic animals, snakes,
pythons,
coyotes, exactly.
Yeah.
They deal with all of that. But basically, with the shortfall in funding that we've had in recent years, Animal Services has been experiencing some funding cuts.
Right.
So they're pretty much down to providing those basic enforcement function, the function of caring for the animals that are brought into the shelter. We're required to hold those animals for 3 days for identification.
Right.
And then the overall administration, the reaching out to the public to educate the public so they'll be more responsible pet owners. We also partner with the animal welfare community. There are a number of animal welfare agencies, the Humane Society, No More Homeless Pets, and to name a couple,
right,
that assist us in adopting out animals. So after they've been held for 3 days, we contact those agencies and try to get as many of the animals as possible placed with those agencies so that they can then be adopted by the community.
Who are the customers for animal services, though? Is it just the unincorporated area, or is it everyone in the county?
Thank you, Mark. That is an insightful question. Animal services is the one of the functions, and maybe, well, it's one of the functions in the county that provides services to both the unincorporated and the incorporated areas of the community of Alachua County.
So I live in the city of Gainesville, and my county tax bill covers animal services.
That's correct.
I see.
And so we provide the service in the cities as well as the unincorporated area. So when the county commission was dealing with the various programs and the costs associated with providing animal services, they're also cognizant of the impact that could have in the cities. In fact, I would say we get about 50 to 60% of our calls are from within the boundaries of the city of Gainesville.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, so it's a significant portion.
And I guess that makes sense. The population is so concentrated there.
And you tend to get more calls from areas that are, like you say, more densely populated, and we are having issues with educating the public on spay, neuter, and responsible pet ownership, and we do spend a fair amount of time in programs aimed at those more densely populated areas.
Rick, one division I know before I came to work at the county that I sort of took for granted was engineering, road, and bridge. Roads just are magically there, and they are magically maintained. And can you tell us about that division?
Yes, Mark, I can. Quite frankly, I think of all the divisions that I'm responsible for overseeing, the one that I'm especially concerned about is road and bridge.
Right.
That is primarily funded by the gas tax. We do have funding from MSTU and some other areas, but it's a small amount, speaking in terms of the total budget.
Right.
The gas tax has been declining in recent years. When I first came with the county 7 years ago, the gas tax was approaching $10 million. It's now down to about $8 million.
Oh, is that right? In spite
just
of
over
the nickel
$8 million.
increase.
Yes, and the nickel increase is for capital projects, so I'm going to deal with that a little bit separately. But in spite of that, the overall gas tax, yes, including that, is significantly down, just over $8 million.
And one important thing for people to understand is, regardless of the price of a gallon of gas, it's not indexed. The gas tax that you collect, that we collect, is the same whether gas is $1 a gallon or whether it's $3 a gallon. Is that correct?
That is correct. In other words, a gallon of gas, you don't pay a percentage of that price to pay for the gas tax. You pay a set amount. And as a result, with mileage being, with people driving more fuel-efficient vehicles, and that's a good thing, and the fact that people apparently are reducing their mileage to a degree impacts it. But quite frankly, as businesses are not out there, as they're being hurt, the gas they would have consumed. And you can imagine in the case of construction industry, they would consume a lot of fuel as well. Well, if that business is down, then obviously that gas is not being sold. And the maintenance of the roads in the county is a user fee.
Right.
You know, I often hear people talk about, we'll get calls from citizens, I pay my taxes and I want you to grade my road and the unimproved roads.
Right.
Or my surface road needs treatment and needs attention, and I need you to do that. And the way that's paid for is through the person purchasing the gas to use their vehicle.
Right.
We do not get, for the most part, a very small amount from other sources to pay for it. Unfortunately, we're at a time when the amount of money we get for the gas tax per gallon is not what it's costing us to, in fact, maintain the roads. I think the original principle was that when the roads were built, let's say a subdivision is built, those roads are built by the developer. The homeowner pays for the price of those capital costs, the building of those roads, when they buy the house. The theory is that then the gas tax will be used as the fee to pay to maintain the road. But if the fee is not high enough to pay the costs, then over time we start getting behind in maintenance. In the case of road and bridge, we now have about $380 million backlog of maintenance needs for our road system. Right. And we need about we're currently getting about $8 million a year in gas tax. We actually need in the neighborhood of $20 million just to maintain approximately 280 miles of unimproved road and just over 600 miles of resurfaced.
Fleet management. I know they have a wide variety of things that they take care of. You know, the first thing you think of are the cars or the trucks that you see driving around with the Alachua County logo on it. But as you look deeper into it, it's also the weed eater on the side of the road. It's the fire truck, the ambulance. Tell us about fleet management.
Yes, the fleet management division is responsible for the maintenance of the county's rolling stock as well as our other equipment. Just as you say, something even as small as a small engine or repair like a weed eater or something to that effect. The bulk of our rolling stock is fueled by diesel fuel, and those are things like motor graders and heavy trucks and so forth. And then we have a smaller percentage of our fleet that's gasoline operated. When people talk about expenditures for fleet, they often think of the vehicles, but actually the biggest cost item is heavy equipment, most especially public safety equipment, fire trucks, ambulances, and they primarily use diesel fuel. And we do have the small engine repairs. The fleet not only is responsible for maintaining the equipment, they're also responsible for purchasing the equipment. We're very proud of the program we call right sizing of our equipment, whereby we try to look at the function of a piece of equipment and try to buy the equipment that is best suited and most efficient and most cost effective to purchase. So for example, some people would see a large county truck perhaps on the roadway and say, well, why don't you drive a smaller truck? Well, if we have to have 2 or 3 pieces, smaller trucks to carry equipment and crews to get to a work site, that'll turn out being more expensive than if we have one larger truck, for example, to haul the crews and all the equipment. Right. And so there's a lot that goes into right sizing. The fleet department division has also recently gotten into retrofitting equipment for ambulances where we can have, or fire equipment where we can have a chassis, rework that chassis, and then just purchase the body, the unit itself, to be attached to that chassis as a cost-effective way we're doing.
I see.
The main thing is the fleet division has about 16 people. Most of our mechanics are certified, have multiple certifications to operate on all types of equipment. That's large equipment, diesel equipment, gasoline equipment, hybrids. They have to be prepared to service all of that equipment. And frankly, I think the county has one of the best fleet divisions I've had an opportunity to work in and around in any place that I've worked.
As a matter of fact, they do some work for outside organizations, don't
Yes, they do. We do some work for the University of Florida as well as for some of the cities. We've just recently started providing vehicle maintenance for the constitutional officers, excluding the sheriff. The sheriff has their own fleet operation because they have a large operation,
Sure.
and frankly do a very fine job. Their fleet operation also is a very good operation. But we provide those. We do charge for that service, and that money then goes to help fund the overall operation of the fleet. The vehicle replacement fund is another thing I want to mention about fleet because that's really important. The county was very wise to set up a vehicle replacement fund whereby when a piece of equipment is purchased, we then start saving money to replace that equipment at the expected life of that equipment.
Right.
That's a very important fund. We got that helps us be able to maintain our fleet. We monitor each piece of equipment for mileage, utilization, cost of repairs, and at the optimum time, we then go ahead and replace that piece of equipment, taking into account all those factors as well as the price of a new piece of equipment.
Right.
That helps us maintain a quality fleet at a reasonable cost and at the same time maximize our return on that original investment. And if I could just mention one other thing,
Sure.
We do auction off our vehicles and equipment at the end of each year, and frankly that returns about $120,000 a year to us to go into that fleet replacement because that's a very important part of that program.
Yeah, it's an impressive operation. You mentioned hybrids a little early, and I would be remiss not to mention that I think we were one of the first governments in the area to really make an investment into hybrid technology.
That is correct. The county purchased some of the early equipment. You may still see some of those hybrids on the road with the big signs about hybrid. Those go back to the original vehicles.
Right.
When we were contacted by the industry and asked if we would help begin that program here with the idea of getting the vehicles exposure as well as the maintenance infrastructure, helping create a maintenance infrastructure to service those pieces of equipment.
Right.
Now we have over 40 hybrids in the fleet and are constantly in the form of Prius, Ford Escapes, and I think those are the two primary, and there's one other.
We've got one electric vehicle that I see driving around the downtown area.
We do, and we do have that, and we're looking at others other fuels as well to possibly experiment with, like we did the hybrid. That's another thing that people don't realize is how much time fleet spends in just staying current with what's going on in the marketplace.
Right.
So that we can, again, reduce fuel consumption, get equipment that meets the needs at the lowest cost. So they not only are dealing with the day-to-day maintenance of a piece of equipment, they are constantly they're constantly looking at new ways to power our equipment.
We have a nice inventory of parks in Alachua County.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the Parks Division?
Yes, we have, that's an interesting division. We basically have a director, and then he has a person that assists him who does contracts, and then we have the employees that work about, again, in the neighborhood of 14, 16 employees. In fact, let me see if I can, well, that's approximately
These are the
correct.
folks that actually do the maintenance.
That do the maintenance. We also contract out the mowing and a lot of the maintenance work in the county directly to businesses in the county to help maintain the parks. Our crews pretty much look after restrooms, look after the equipment in the parks and make sure they're safe and properly repaired and stay in that condition to protect users from injury. Right. We have about 24 parks, and the those people maintain them plus the contracted companies service the parks.
Right.
And it's quite, and they most recently taken over responsibility for the fairgrounds. So that was a huge undertaking.
I saw that.
And so the parks has quite a responsibility. But what's probably one of the more exciting things that's happened is with the funding reductions. We've had two parks that came online: the Cynthia Moore Chestnut Clark Butler Park in the eastern part of the county,
right,
and the Jonesville Park in the southwestern part of the county. And the Chestnut Butler Park is particularly interesting because a lot of the work that was done in the way of planning and engineering and so forth was done with the help of contributions from those companies. They
right,
did not charge us for that service.
Right.
In addition, Mr. Butler, who's recently deceased, but Mr. Butler donated about $250,000 to that to help pay for the development of that park. But with the combination of the financial contribution, some grant money that we were able to receive, as well as with the labor and in-kind service that was provided on the part of local businesses, that park is a reality. And if you go over there, it's a beautiful park.
It is.
It has really helped, provided a very important service to that community. And the community takes a lot of pride in that park. And we get calls if anyone is not taking care of that park. We hear about it and we're able to respond.
Now, you mentioned Jonesville
Yes.
Park as well, though, and that's an amazing conglomeration of partnerships with private entities or other nonprofit entities.
You are correct. That's approximately 90-acre park. We had the land, and we had a plan that and envisioned developing that park over a longer time frame. But several years ago, we were approached by the Soccer Alliance to allow them to go ahead and develop the soccer complex, and they actually funded the development of that and built that soccer complex. I think it was about a $700,000 investment. Then, right behind that, we were contacted by the Rotary clubs of the area, and they were providing funding for the baseball complex.
Right, right.
And then the tennis, we have a tennis entity who approached us with the idea of building and running the tennis facility. So now we have a predominantly built-out park with the soccer complex. The baseball fields will be finished shortly,
Right.
or being finished up, as well as a state-of-the-art clay tennis court complex that's become quite popular in the community. And so another example of the community partnering with the county to develop this facility.
Rick, I can't believe how quickly time is going. We're going to have you back, but I do definitely want to spend some time on waste management
Right.
and solid waste. Tell us about that division.
Okay, real quickly, solid waste is also one of the crown jewels, I think, or the waste management, we prefer to call it,
Right.
is one of the crown jewels, I think, of the county operations. We have the Levita Brown Environmental Park, which is a state-of-the-art park that handles hazardous waste, it does recycling. Of course, it's also a facility whereby we collect the waste to put into long-haul trailers to haul currently to a landfill.
Right.
We've recently purchased some property next to the Levita Brown Environmental Park to set up as an economic development park where we'll attract companies who will come to that park, hopefully, to use the commodities that we pull from the waste stream for recycling.
This is the Resource Recovery Park. Yeah, we
Yes.
did an interview with Dr.
Right.
Selman, I think, about that. Yeah.
Right, and then the element we're working on right now is the organics recycling biomass facility, which will be another facility whereby we're going to collect organics recyclables, which is about 60 to 70% of our waste stream. For purpose, those are things like pizza boxes and
Right.
contaminated food waste and so forth. Well, that will go into this organics recycling. We'll be able to use it, use the gas to store that, use the gas that's generated from that waste to generate electricity, and then we'll be able to turn that product into compost.
Right.
Which we can then use for sod or in our growing sod or hay for use in our own operations.
And this is all part of the the state guideline about the 75% recycling goal by 2020, is that correct?
That's part of it. There's really two factors. One, the state, as you're correct, it has established a target of 75% by 2020 for us to meet, of recycled waste, reused waste, diverted waste, and that's important. But another part is we run the waste management as a business.
Right.
So all of these elements go together to help us manage our waste stream more efficiently and either reduce manage the cost to the public for providing that service. And instead of taking our waste and putting it in a hole in the ground to be covered up for whatever, perpetuity I suppose, we're hopefully going to be able to take these waste products and turn them into commodities, if you will.
Well, on that note, we have to say goodbye. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.